The encounter. The air was heavy with tension in the central courtyard of the prison moon Zarkon. The facility, carved into the rocky surface of a forgotten moon, held the most dangerous criminals from across the galaxy. For years, no one dared challenge its warden, Serethis, the towering 8-foot alien queen. Her rule was absolute, her strength unmatched. Few had ever stood before her and lived to tell the tale. Today was no different, or so it seemed. Prisoners huddled in silent fear as Serethis entered the courtyard, her shadow casting a long, dark streak over the trembling crowd. Her scales shimmered under the pale, artificial lights, and her piercing yellow eyes scanned the new arrivals like a predator eyeing its prey. The latest batch of prisoners included beings from all corners of the galaxy, toughened warriors, sly smugglers, and even a few broken souls who had already given up. Among them was a lone human named Alex. He stood at the edge of the group, his shoulders relaxed, his face calm. Compared to the hulking aliens around him, Alex looked insignificant, a frail, underwhelming creature. Serethis stopped in front of the group, her gaze narrowing as she inspected each prisoner. When her eyes landed on Alex, she tilted her head, a smirk curling across her sharp, reptilian face. "A human," she said, her voice echoing across the courtyard. "They sent me this." The other prisoners snickered, grateful that someone else had drawn the queen's attention. Alex, however, didn't flinch. He held her gaze, his expression unreadable. The silence that followed was unnerving. Even Serethis raised a brow, clearly not used to such defiance. "What's this?" she asked, stepping closer. Her towering frame loomed over Alex, her presence overwhelming. "Do you not fear me, little human?" Alex finally spoke, his voice steady and clear. "Fear is a luxury I can't afford, Your Majesty." The courtyard fell silent. The other prisoners stared, wide-eyed, as if they couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Serethis' smirk widened, but there was no humor in it. Her claws flexed at her sides, scraping against the stone ground. "You're either very brave," she said, her tone dripping with mockery, "or very stupid. Which is it?" Alex shrugged, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Maybe both, or maybe neither. I've learned that actions speak louder than words." For a moment, Serethis simply stared at him. Then she laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that made the walls of the courtyard vibrate. The other prisoners exchanged nervous glances, unsure if this was a good sign or a very, very bad one. "You amuse me, human," Serethis said, leaning down until her face was just inches from his. "But amusement only lasts so long. Let's see if your actions are as bold as your words." She straightened up and turned to her guards. "Throw him into the arena," she commanded. "Let's see how long this human can last." The crowd gasped. The arena was a death sentence. It was where prisoners were thrown to fight against monstrous creatures for the queen's entertainment. No one had ever survived. 2 guards grabbed Alex by the arms, dragging him toward the gates leading to the arena. He didn't struggle or protest. Instead, he walked with steady steps, his face unreadable. As the gates slammed shut behind him, Alex found himself in a circular pit surrounded by towering walls. The ground was littered with bones, and the air was thick with the smell of blood. Across from him, a gate creaked open, and a massive, snarling beast stepped into the arena. It had 4 eyes, razor-sharp claws, and muscles that rippled with every step. The crowd above roared with anticipation. Serethis leaned against the railing, her yellow eyes fixed on Alex. "Let's see what you're made of, little human," she muttered to herself. The beast charged, its claws digging into the ground as it sprinted toward Alex. For a moment, it seemed like Alex was frozen, standing still as the monstrous creature closed the distance. Then, at the last possible second, he moved. With surprising agility, Alex dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's attack. He grabbed a jagged piece of bone from the ground and rolled to his feet, holding it like a weapon. The crowd quieted slightly, surprised by his quick reflexes. The beast snarled and lunged again, but Alex was ready. He sidestepped the attack and jabbed the bone into the creature's side. It wasn't enough to kill it, but it was enough to make it hesitate. Blood dripped onto the dirt as the beast growled in pain, circling Alex more cautiously now. Above, Cerethis' smirk faded slightly. She leaned forward, watching the human with growing interest. He wasn't just surviving. He was analyzing, adapting. It wasn't brute strength that kept him alive, but something far more dangerous: intelligence. The fight continued, with Alex dodging and countering each of the beast's attacks. He used the environment to his advantage, luring the creature into traps and exploiting its weaknesses. Finally, with one well-timed strike, he drove the bone into the beast's throat. The creature collapsed, its body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The courtyard erupted into silence. No one had expected this outcome. Cerethis stared down at Alex, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she began to clap, the sound echoing through the arena. "Well done, human," she said, her voice carrying a hint of genuine admiration. "You've earned my attention." Alex looked up at her, his chest heaving from the effort. "I told you," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. Actions speak louder than words. For the first time in years, Cerethis felt a flicker of curiosity. This human was different, and she intended to find out why. The challenge. The arena's gates creaked open, and the guards dragged Alex back to the prison courtyard. His steps were slower this time, his muscles aching from the fight. The other prisoners stared at him with a mix of awe and disbelief. No one had ever survived the arena before, let alone against such a vicious creature. Cerethis leaned back in her throne, her piercing yellow eyes never leaving Alex. The smirk on her lips had softened into something more curious, almost calculating. "Interesting," she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "You didn't just survive. You adapted. Most of your kind would have died cowering in fear. But you're either lucky or clever." Alex, standing upright despite the pain, locked eyes with her once again. "Luck only gets you so far. The rest is skill." The courtyard fell silent, the weight of Alex's words hanging in the air. Cerethis tilted her head, clearly intrigued by the human's unshakable confidence. She rose from her throne, her towering frame commanding attention as she stepped closer to Alex. "You speak as if you're more than just a human," she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "But words are cheap, little one. Let's see if your actions can prove your worth again." Alex raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Another test, Your Majesty. Haven't I already entertained you enough for one day?" Cerethis chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent shivers through the crowd. "Oh, you've entertained me, human. But you've also piqued my curiosity. And that is a rare thing indeed." She gestured to the guards. "Take him to the labyrinth." The crowd gasped. The labyrinth was a twisted maze filled with deadly traps and lurking predators. It was a place of nightmares, designed to break even the strongest warriors. No one had ever made it out alive. Alex's smirk faded, but his eyes remained sharp. He nodded once, accepting the challenge without a word. The guards escorted him to the labyrinth's entrance, a massive jagged doorway carved into the rocky ground. Before he entered, Cerethis called out to him. "Survive this, human," she said, her voice echoing through the courtyard. "And I might just start to believe there's more to your species than frailty and arrogance." Alex turned his head slightly, glancing back at her. "Careful, Your Majesty," he replied. "You might end up impressed." The labyrinth was darker than Alex had expected. The walls were lined with sharp, uneven stones that seemed to shift as he moved. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint stench of decay. He moved cautiously, every step deliberate, his senses heightened. The first trap came quickly, a set of pressure-sensitive tiles that triggered a volley of sharp spears from the walls. Alex froze, studying the pattern of the tiles. After a moment of careful observation, he stepped forward, avoiding the triggers with precision. The spears shot out harmlessly behind him. "All right," he muttered to himself, one step at a time. Deeper into the labyrinth, the challenges grew deadlier. A massive predator, resembling a cross between a lizard and a wolf, stalked him through the narrow corridors. Its glowing red eyes followed his every move, its claws clicking against the stone floor. Alex knew he couldn't fight it head-on, not in his current state. Instead, he used the labyrinth itself as a weapon. He lured the creature into a trap, tricking it into stepping onto a collapsing floor tile. The beast let out a deafening roar as it plummeted into the pit below, disappearing into the darkness. As Alex pressed on, he couldn't help but think about Serethis. Her interest in him wasn't just amusement. There was something more to it. She wanted to understand him, to test him. And in some strange way, he felt compelled to prove himself, not just to her, but to everyone who had doubted humanity's strength. Back in the courtyard, Serethis watched the monitors displaying Alex's progress through the labyrinth. Her court murmured around her, their voices filled with disbelief and concern. "This human, he's unlike any we've seen," one of her advisors said cautiously. "He's unpredictable." Serethis didn't respond immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the screen, watching as Alex narrowly escaped yet another deadly trap. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite place. He was small, fragile compared to her kind, yet he moved with a confidence that defied logic. "Unpredictable," she finally said, her voice soft but firm. "Yes, and that makes him dangerous." One of the advisors frowned. "Do you really think he'll survive the labyrinth, Your Majesty?" Serethis leaned back in her throne, her expression thoughtful. "If he doesn't, then he's just like the rest of his kind. But if he does," she trailed off, a strange glint in her eyes, "then we may have underestimated humanity." After hours of navigating the labyrinth, Alex finally reached the exit. His body was bruised, his clothes torn, but his spirit remained unbroken. As he stepped into the courtyard, the crowd erupted into stunned silence. Even the guards, who had been dismissive of him before, exchanged uneasy glances. Serethis rose from her throne, her towering figure casting a shadow over Alex as she approached. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's surprise, she nodded. "You're more than I expected, human," she said, her voice quieter now, almost respectful. "But this is only the beginning." Alex met her gaze, his exhaustion clear but his determination unwavering. "Then give me your best shot," he replied, his tone calm yet challenging. Serethis chuckled softly, a rare smile crossing her lips. "Oh, I will, little one. I will." Unlikely allies. The days following Alex's survival of the labyrinth were anything but peaceful. The prison moon Zarkan buzzed with rumors about the human who had not only survived the arena, but also conquered the labyrinth, a feat no one else had achieved. The alien prisoners whispered his name in hushed tones, their mocking sneers replaced by cautious curiosity. Even the guards, once indifferent to his existence, now watched him with wary respect. For Serethis, however, curiosity was quickly evolving into something more dangerous: intrigue. Sitting on her obsidian throne, she reviewed footage of Alex's trials, watching the way he outmaneuvered traps, exploited weaknesses, and adapted to every challenge. She had intended to break him, to remind him of humanity's inferiority. Instead, he had proven himself a wild card, a factor she couldn't predict or control. "Your Majesty," one of her advisors interrupted her thoughts, his tone hesitant. "The Council has expressed concerns about the human. They believe his survival sets a troubling precedent." Serethis turned her sharp, yellow gaze on the advisor, her lip curling slightly. "Troubling, because he succeeded where others failed, or because he made us look foolish in the process." The advisor swallowed hard, clearly regretting his words. "It's just dangerous to let him live." He's already inspiring whispers among the prisoners. Some see him as a symbol of defiance. Serethis leaned back, her scales shimmering in the dim light. Good. Let them whisper. A little fear keeps things interesting. Meanwhile, Alex was growing accustomed to the new dynamic within the prison. His survival had shifted the balance of power among the prisoners. Some avoided him, fearful of what his resilience might provoke. Others sought him out, hoping to align themselves with the man who had captured the Queen's attention. One evening, as Alex rested in his cell, a faint sound reached his ears, a soft, hurried tapping against the walls. He frowned, his instincts kicking in. Rising slowly, he moved toward the source of the sound. A panel in the wall shifted slightly, revealing a pair of large, glassy eyes. "Human," a voice whispered, low and urgent. It belonged to an alien prisoner, his spindly fingers clutching the edges of the hidden passage. "You need to leave. Tonight." Alex raised an eyebrow, folding his arms. "And why would I do that? I've got a nice little setup here." The alien shook his head frantically. "You don't understand. The Queen's Council sees you as a threat. They'll come for you soon, execution or worse. You have to escape while you can." Alex studied the alien carefully, noting the fear in his trembling voice. But there was something else beneath the panic. Desperation. Perhaps even guilt. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Alex asked, his tone measured. The alien hesitated before replying. "Because you give us hope. If someone like you can survive here, maybe we can too." Alex smirked faintly, leaning closer. "Hope's a dangerous thing. You sure you're ready for that?" Before the alien could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. The alien vanished back into the passage, sealing it shut just as a pair of guards approached Alex's cell. "The Queen summons you," one of them growled, unlocking the door. "Move." Alex was escorted to Serethis' private chamber, a vast, cavernous space adorned with trophies from her conquests. Weapons, skulls, and ancient artifacts lined the walls, each one a testament to her power. She stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, watching as Alex entered. "Back so soon?" Alex quipped, his voice casual despite the tension in the air. "I was starting to think you've forgotten about me." Serethis' eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of amusement in her gaze. "You have a habit of making an impression, human. It's not every day someone like you survives the labyrinth. And lives to tell the tale." "Glad I could entertain," Alex replied, leaning against the nearest wall. "But something tells me this isn't just a social visit." Serethis stepped closer, her towering figure casting a long shadow over him. "You're smarter than you look, I'll give you that. Tell me, Alex, why are you really here?" Alex shrugged. "Bad luck, I suppose. Wrong place, wrong time." The Queen's lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You survived because you're resourceful, calculating. That makes you useful and dangerous. My council thinks I should get rid of you before you become a bigger problem." "And what do you think?" Alex asked, his tone calm despite the weight of her words. Serethis studied him for a moment before answering. "I think you're more valuable alive than dead. For now." She turned away, her tail swishing behind her. "But if you want to stay alive, you'll need to prove yourself again. There's a rebellion brewing among the prisoners. An attempt to overthrow my rule. They'll come for me, but they'll come for you too, thinking you'll side with them. And you want me to help you stop them," Alex said, piecing it together. Serethis glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Consider it another challenge. You survive, I let you live. You fail. Well, I think you understand the stakes." As the guards escorted Alex back to his cell, he couldn't help but chuckle softly to himself. Serethis wasn't just testing his survival skills anymore. She was testing his loyalty. But loyalty to what? The Queen? The prisoners? Himself? One thing was certain. The game was far from over, and Alex wasn't planning on losing. The proposal. The rebellion's whispers had grown louder in the shadows of Zarkan's labyrinthine halls. Prisoners, emboldened by Alex's survival and defiance, began rallying to the idea of overthrowing Cerethus. The Queen's advisors warned her of the growing unrest, but she remained calm, confident in her power to crush any uprising. For Alex, however, the situation was more complicated. In the days following his conversation with Cerethus, the rebel factions reached out to him. Some saw him as a potential ally, a symbol of resistance. Others viewed him as a threat, a wild card who could tip the scales in favor of the Queen if he chose her side. Alex, as always, stayed silent, observing the pieces moving around him. He had no interest in taking sides. Not yet. One evening, Alex was summoned once again to Cerethus' private chamber. The guards escorted him down dimly lit corridors, their heavy boots echoing against the cold stone. When he entered the room, he found Cerethus standing by a holographic map of the prison moon. The flickering display showed movement patterns of guards, prisoners, and key points of interest. She didn't look up as he entered. "Do you know why I keep you alive, human?" she asked, her tone calm but sharp. Alex stepped closer, folding his arms. "Because I amuse you." Her lips twitched into a faint smile, but her eyes remained fixed on the map. "Amusement is fleeting." "No, I keep you alive because you're useful. Your kind is resourceful in ways my people struggle to understand. You adapt, you innovate, you endure. I've seen it in you." "Flattered," Alex replied. "But I'm guessing this isn't just a compliment session." Cerethus turned to face him, her towering frame casting a shadow over the room. "The rebellion is real. It's not just a few disgruntled prisoners. It's a coordinated effort. My sources tell me they plan to strike soon, and they see you as a potential ally." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Do they now?" "They see you as one of them," Cerethus continued, stepping closer. "But you're not. You're an outsider, just like me. The difference is, I have power. You have potential. And what exactly do you want from me?" Alex asked, his voice steady. Cerethus paused for a moment before responding. "I want you to betray them." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Alex tilted his head, studying her expression. Despite her calm demeanor, there was an edge of tension in her voice, a sign that she wasn't as invincible as she appeared. "You want me to spy on them," Alex said, breaking the silence. "To gain their trust, feed them false information, and sabotage their plans." "Precisely," Cerethus replied. "In return, I'll guarantee your survival. More than that, I'll give you freedom." Alex chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Freedom? On this rock? Forgive me if I don't believe you." "I don't make empty promises, human," Cerethus said firmly. "Help me crush this rebellion, and I'll arrange for your release. You'll leave Zarkan alive, a privilege you can claim." Alex's smirk faded, replaced by a more serious expression. "And what happens to the rebels? To the people who trusted me?" "They'll meet the same fate as anyone who challenges my rule," Cerethus said coldly. "This is survival, Alex. You've proven you're good at it. Now's your chance to prove it again." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Alex's mind raced as he considered her offer. Betraying the rebels would ensure his safety, maybe even his freedom. But it would also make him a pawn in Cerethus's game. On the other hand, siding with the rebellion could give him a chance to change the balance of power, though it would likely end in death. "You're hesitating," Cerethus said, her sharp gaze piercing through him. "Why? Do you think the rebels will succeed without you? Do you think they'll spare you when they rise to power?" Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I think everyone here underestimates me, including you." Cerethus tilted her head, intrigued by his response. "Then prove me wrong. Show me that you're more than just another prisoner." Later that night, Alex sat in his dimly lit cell, replaying the conversation in his mind. He didn't trust Cerethus, but he couldn't ignore the opportunity she was offering. Freedom was a tempting prize, one that could outweigh the risks. But something about her proposal didn't sit right with him. As he stared at the cracked ceiling, the alien who had warned him earlier appeared again, slipping through a hidden panel in the wall. This time, his voice was more urgent. "You're in danger, human," the alien whispered. "The Queen will use you and then dispose of you. The rebels are your only chance." Alex sighed, rubbing his temples. "Let me guess. You want me to join your cause, right? Fight for the freedom of the oppressed." The alien nodded eagerly. "Yes. With your skills, we can overthrow her. We can build a new order." "And what happens to me after that?" Alex asked, his voice sharp. "Do I get a seat at your table, or do I end up as another pawn in someone else's game?" The alien hesitated, clearly unprepared for the question. "That's what I thought," Alex muttered, leaning back against the wall. The next day, Alex met with Seraphis again. This time, he had a proposition of his own. "I'll help you," he said, his tone firm. "But on one condition. When this is over, I don't just want freedom. I want something more." Seraphis raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "And what might that be?" "Leverage," Alex replied. "A guarantee that you won't betray me. Something that ensures I leave here alive, no matter what happens." Seraphis smirked, folding her arms. "You're negotiating with a queen, human. Bold move." "Bold is what keeps me alive." Alex shot back. For a moment, Seraphis considered his words. Then she nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this. If you betray me, there won't be enough of you left for the rebels to bury." "Understood," Alex said, his voice calm but determined. "Let's get to work." As Alex left her chamber, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time since arriving on Zarkon, he wasn't just a survivor, he was a player in the game. And he intended to win. Unexpected changes. The rebellion was simmering, and Alex found himself at the center of the storm. By day, he worked alongside Seraphis, feeding her updates on the rebels' movements. By night, he infiltrated their ranks, pretending to be their ally. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required every ounce of his cunning and adaptability. But something unexpected began to happen. As Alex spent more time with Seraphis, he started to see cracks in her seemingly invincible exterior. The way she lingered over the holographic map late at night, studying every detail with a furrowed brow. The way her advisors hesitated before speaking, their fear of her apparent even in her presence. Seraphis wasn't just a ruler. She was a leader under siege, fighting to maintain control in a world where alliances shifted like sand. And then there were the moments when she let her guard down. One night, as they reviewed the latest intelligence reports, she glanced at Alex and asked, almost casually, "Do humans have a word for this?" "For what?" Alex asked, looking up from the datapad. "For being surrounded by enemies," she replied, her tone unusually quiet. "For trusting no one, not even your own people." Alex hesitated, caught off guard by the vulnerability in her voice. "We call it paranoia," he said finally, "but some call it survival." Seraphis nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "Survival," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, that's what it always comes down to." The rebels, meanwhile, were growing restless. They demanded results, pressing Alex for details about Seraphis's weaknesses. He fed them just enough to keep their trust, but not enough to fully commit. It was a dangerous game, and Alex knew it couldn't last forever. One evening, the rebel leader, a wiry insectoid alien named Kyrax, confronted Alex in the shadows of the prison courtyard. "You've been working with us for weeks now," Kyrax said, his multifaceted eyes gleaming in the dim light. "But we've seen no progress. Tell me, human, where do your loyalties truly lie?" Alex met Kyrax's gaze, his expression calm. "My loyalties lie with survival," he said simply. "Yours, mine, everyone's." Kyrax clicked his mandibles, clearly unsatisfied. Cryptic answers won't save you when the time comes, human. Choose your side wisely. As Kyrax disappeared into the darkness, Alex felt the weight of his predicament pressing down on him. He wasn't just playing both sides. He was caught between them, a pawn in a game where the stakes were life and death. The turning point came during a rare quiet moment with Cerethis. They were in her private chamber, discussing strategy, when she suddenly changed the subject. "Tell me, Alex," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Do you hate me?" Alex blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "It's a simple question," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You've seen how I rule, how I control this prison, how I crush anyone who dares defy me. Do you hate me for it?" Alex considered his answer carefully. "I don't hate you," he said finally, "but I don't trust you either." Cerethis chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Wise words, human. Trust is a luxury neither of us can afford." She paused, her gaze drifting to the holographic map. "But hate, that's something I understand. It's what fuels the rebellion. It's what keeps them fighting, even when they know they can't win." "And what fuels you?" Alex asked, his voice low. For a moment, Cerethis didn't answer. Then she turned to him, her yellow eyes locking onto his. "Duty," she said. "To my people, to my legacy. I am the last of my kind, Alex. If I fall, everything my species has built will vanish with me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Alex realized, perhaps for the first time, that Cerethis wasn't just a tyrant. She was a survivor, like him. And in her own way, she was just as trapped as he was. As the days passed, Alex noticed subtle changes in Cerethis. She began to ask him for his opinion on strategy, valuing his input in ways her advisors never had. She even showed moments of humor, teasing him about his human stubbornness. And though he wouldn't admit it, Alex found himself respecting her in ways he hadn't expected. But with respect came doubt. Was he doing the right thing by betraying the rebels? Could he really trust Cerethis to keep her promise of freedom? And most importantly, was there a way to end this conflict without sacrificing one side for the other? The tension reached a boiling point when Alex overheard a conversation between two of Cerethis' advisors. They spoke in hushed tones, unaware of his presence. "The queen is growing too close to the human," one of them said, his voice sharp with disdain. "It's dangerous. He's manipulating her." "She's not a fool," the other replied. "She knows what she's doing. But if he becomes a liability..." Alex didn't wait to hear the rest. He slipped away, his mind racing. It wasn't just the rebels he had to worry about now. It was Cerethis' own court. That night, as he stared at the cracked ceiling of his cell, he made a decision. He couldn't keep playing both sides. It was time to choose, but the choice wouldn't be simple. It never was. For Alex, survival wasn't just about staying alive anymore. It was about finding a way to rewrite the rules of the game. And if anyone could do that, it was him. The rebellion. The storm finally broke. The rebellion launched their attack in the dead of night, timing it perfectly with a scheduled power disruption in the prison systems. The lights flickered, alarms wailed, and chaos erupted as prisoners poured out of their cells, overwhelming the guards with sheer numbers. Explosions rocked the facility as key security points were destroyed, plunging the moon into anarchy. Alex stood at the edge of the chaos, watching as the battle unfolded. He had seen it coming, the whispers, the preparations, the building tension, but even he hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly. His heart raced as he weighed his options. He could join the rebels as they expected, or stand with Cerethis, as she demanded. But deep down, he knew neither side truly trusted him. He was alone in this fight, just as he had always been, in Cerethis' command room. The queen stood before a massive holographic display. Her yellow eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. Her advisors were in a frenzy, shouting conflicting strategies and pleading for immediate action. But Cerethis silenced them with a single wave of her hand. Enough, she growled. This is not the time for panic. One of her advisors, a wiry, snake-like alien, hissed nervously. Your Majesty, the rebels are overwhelming the outer defenses. They've already breached the eastern wing. If they reach the control center. They won't, Serathis interrupted coldly. We'll crush them here. She turned to Alex, who had been brought to her side moments earlier by her guards. Well, human, this is what you wanted, isn't it? Chaos, opportunity, survival. Alex shrugged, his expression unreadable. I told you, I didn't pick a side. But I'm here now. What do you want me to do? Serathis's eyes gleamed with something that almost resembled respect. I want you to do what you do best. Survive. Get into the heart of the rebellion. Find their leader and end this. And if I say no? Alex asked, his voice calm. Serathis leaned in close, her towering frame casting a shadow over him. Then you die with the rest of them. Alex smirked faintly. Fair enough. In the midst of the battle, Alex moved through the chaos with practiced ease, slipping between fighting factions and avoiding detection. The rebels, caught up in their assault, barely noticed him. He navigated the crumbling prison, following the trail of destruction toward the rebellion's command point. As he approached, he found Kyrax, the insectoid leader, barking orders to a group of rebels. Alex stepped out of the shadows, his presence drawing immediate suspicion. Kyrax's multifaceted eyes narrowed as he turned to face him. You're late, Kyrax said, his voice laced with mistrust. Alex spread his hands in a mock gesture of innocence. Traffic was terrible. What's the plan? Kyrax hissed, clearly unimpressed. The plan is simple. We take the control center, kill the queen, and free ourselves from her tyranny. Are you with us or not? Alex hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for Kyrax to notice. The rebel leader's antennae twitched, and his clawed hand moved toward his weapon. You've been playing both sides, Kyrax growled. Haven't you? Alex didn't respond. Instead, he lunged forward, disarming Kyrax in one swift motion. The surrounding rebels reacted instantly, weapons raised, but Alex held up a hand, his voice steady. Wait, listen to me, he said. If you kill Serathis, the power vacuum will destroy everything you're trying to build. You need her alive, at least for now. Kyrax sneered. You think she'll spare us? She'll crush us the moment we lower our weapons. Not if we force her to negotiate, Alex countered. She's desperate to hold on to her power. Use that to your advantage. Fight smart, not blindly. The rebels hesitated, glancing at each other uncertainly. Kyrax's mandibles clicked in frustration, but he didn't order an attack. Instead, he glared at Alex, his eyes full of mistrust. Why should we trust you, human? Kyrax demanded. Because I don't care about Serathis, Alex said, his voice cold. Or you. I care about staying alive. And right now, the only way any of us survive is if we end this war before it destroys us all. The standoff. Alex's gamble paid off. For the moment, he managed to convince the rebels to halt their advance and send a small delegation, led by Kyrax, to negotiate with Serathis. The journey back to the command center was tense, the air thick with mistrust on both sides. When they arrived, Serathis was waiting, flanked by her guards. Her expression was as sharp as ever, but there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes when she saw Alex standing with the rebels. You brought them here alive, she said, her tone skeptical. Unexpected. Alex stepped forward, his gaze steady. You wanted this rebellion crushed. I'm giving you a chance to do it without turning this moon into a graveyard. Serathis raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint smirk. And what do you propose, human? Compromise, Alex said firmly. The rebels stand down. In return, you implement changes, better treatment for the prisoners, fairer systems. Prove that you can lead with strength and not just fear. The room fell silent, the weight of Alex's words hanging in the air. For a moment, it seemed as though Serethis might refuse. But then she laughed, a low, rumbling sound that made everyone tense. "You think you can lecture me on leadership," she said, her voice mocking. "Bold, even for you." Alex met her gaze, unflinching. "Bold is what's kept me alive this long. Your move, Your Majesty." The Queen's decision. To everyone's shock, Serethis extended her hand toward Kyrax. "Very well," she said. "We'll negotiate. But if you betray me, insect, I'll make sure you regret it." Kyrax hesitated before reluctantly shaking her hand. The rebellion had been quelled, for now. But Alex knew this was only the beginning. Trust was fragile, and peace was a balancing act. As Serethis and Kyrax discussed terms, Alex stepped back, his mind racing. He had survived yet another challenge, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still a pawn in a much larger game. One thing was certain, he wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. Humanity's legacy. The uneasy truce between Serethis and the rebels held, but barely. The prison moon Zarkon, once a place of absolute order under the iron rule of the Queen, had transformed into a volatile powder keg. Every glance between a guard and a rebel, every hesitant handshake, carried the weight of mistrust. Alex stood at the center of it all, the man who had brokered peace, but also exposed the fragility of everyone's position. A new beginning. Serethis summoned Alex to her chamber the day after the negotiations, her yellow eyes scrutinizing him as if trying to decode his very essence. "You've accomplished what no one else could, human," she said, her tone neutral. "You've forced two sides that hate each other to sit at the same table. But tell me, Alex, what's your endgame?" Alex leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. "My endgame? Survival. Same as always." Serethis stepped closer, her towering frame casting a shadow over him. "You've already survived. Now you're something more. You've proven yourself as a strategist, a leader. Do you really want to walk away from all this?" "Walk away?" Alex said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "You mean survive another day?" "Yeah, I think I'm good at that." Serethis' gaze sharpened. "I'm offering you more than survival, Alex. I'm offering you a place by my side. Together, we can rebuild this moon, not as a prison, but as a stronghold, a place where strength and intelligence thrive." Alex raised an eyebrow. "And the rebels? The ones who trusted me enough to negotiate peace? They'll fall in line," Serethis said, her voice cold. "Or they'll be dealt with." "That's not leadership," Alex countered. "That's just control with a fresh coat of paint." For a moment, Serethis said nothing, her jaw tightening. Then, to Alex's surprise, she laughed, a low, rumbling sound that echoed in the chamber. "You're impossible, human," she said, shaking her head. "Fine. Show me another way. Prove to me that strength and compassion can coexist." Serethis watched his efforts with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. She often challenged his decisions, testing his resolve. But each time, Alex held his ground, refusing to back down. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck overlooking the rocky expanse of Zarkon, Serethis spoke. "You remind me of someone," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Let me guess," Alex replied. "A thorn in your side." Serethis smirked. "My first commander. He was different. He believed that strength wasn't just about power, it was about unity. I thought him a fool, but now I wonder if he saw something I didn't." Alex looked at her, his expression serious. "And what do you see now?" "I see a human," she said, meeting his gaze, "one who refuses to be broken. The final betrayal." Just as things seemed to stabilize, betrayal struck. A rogue faction of rebels, unwilling to accept peace, launched a surprise attack on the control center. They aimed to kill Serethis and seize power once and for all. The assault was swift and brutal. Explosions rocked the facility as the traitors stormed the halls, cutting down guards and prisoners alike. Alex, caught in the crossfire, found himself fighting alongside Seraphis to defend the control room. "You really know how to make enemies," Alex quipped, ducking behind a console as plasma bolts whizzed overhead. Seraphis smirked, her claws slashing through an attacker. "And you know how to attract trouble. A perfect match, wouldn't you say?" Their banter was cut short as the rebel leader, Kyrax, entered the room, his weapon aimed directly at Seraphis. "This ends now," Kyrax hissed, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with fury. "No more games. No more queens." Alex stepped between them, raising his hands. "Kyrax, think this through. If you kill her, the truce falls apart. The moon descends into chaos." "Good," Kyrax growled. "Let it burn. Better chaos than her tyranny." Alex's gaze hardened. "And what happens after the chaos? Who leads then? You?" Kyrax hesitated, his grip on the weapon faltering. That moment of doubt was all Alex needed. He lunged forward, disarming Kyrax in one swift motion. The rebel leader snarled, but Alex pinned him to the ground, his voice low and cold. "I've had enough of this," Alex said. "Enough of you, enough of her, enough of all of it. We're not burning this place to the ground. Not today." A new era. The rebellion was crushed, but Alex made sure it didn't end in bloodshed. Kyrax and his rogue faction were exiled, sent to the barren wastelands of Zarkon, where they could no longer threaten the fragile peace. In the aftermath, Seraphis approached Alex, her expression unreadable. "You've done it again, human. Saved the day. Made me look weak in the process." Alex shrugged. "You're still standing, aren't you? Strength isn't about never bending. It's about knowing when to." Seraphis studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps there's more to leadership than power." The legacy. As the weeks turned into months, the prison moon of Zarkon transformed. It became a symbol of unity, a place where strength and intelligence worked hand in hand. Seraphis ruled with Alex as her advisor, her once iron grip tempered by his insight. For Alex, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was about building something that could last, a legacy that proved humanity's strength wasn't just in its resilience, but in its ability to adapt, to unite, and to thrive. As he stood on the observation deck one last time, Seraphis joined him, her towering frame casting a long shadow. "You've changed this place," she said. "And me." Alex smiled faintly. "You're not so bad for an 8-foot queen. And you're not so insignificant for a human," she replied, smirking. They stood in silence, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. The game wasn't over, but for the first time, Alex felt like he wasn't just a piece on the board. He was a player, and the future was his to shape.